How you doing, everybody? Old World New York here. I hope you are all having a blessed week. I thank you all for subscribing and for all your comments and for all your feedback. Seems like we're building an awesome community here. You are all a blessing. Please follow me on Instagram at oldworldny. I also need to give a special thank you to this gentleman right here. This is Lucius Aurelian. Thank you, brother, for featuring some research I had shared with you on a recent video that you had done. That is Colossal Trees, A Lost Glory. You did such an awesome job presenting the material as expected. Man, you are awesome. I look forward to continuing to collaborate with you, and I wish you continued success on your very awesome channel. So thank you again, Lucius Aurelian. I want to tell you about this book I found in my parents' house over the weekend. I was visiting with them, and like going through these books I noticed on this cabinet in the basement, and then like some sort of research manna from heaven, this book just appeared. And like I do remember my father having this book many years ago, but obviously I have a newfound interest in light of this new research that I have discovered a little over a year ago now, I'd say. The book is John Grafton, New York in the 19th Century, 317 engravings from Harper's Weekly and other contemporary sources. As a lot of you, I'm sure, know, Harper's Weekly was a very popular publication in the 1800s and did these very detailed illustrations, or as they call them, engravings, in their newspapers. They really captured in detail everything that was going on. I mean, like, it was like the next best thing to a photograph. So a lot of cool images in that book, and I was figured I'd find something amazing, but I mean, I was blown away when I saw this image as the first illustration. Did you know that New York had its own Crystal Palace? Yes, in 1853. He had this beauty modeled on London's Crystal Palace. I'll read this over here, which had been built in Hyde Park in 1851. The New York Crystal Palace opened on July 14th, 1853, designed by architects George Costanza and Art Vandelay. No, sorry for the Seinfeld reference there. Designed by architects George Carstensen and Charles Geldemeister. The huge iron and glass building was shaped like a Greek cross, 365 feet in diameter. Interesting number. With a dome in the center. Beautiful dome, too. The structure was built on 6th Avenue between 40th and 42nd Streets, the site of today's Bryant Park, just behind the Croton Distributing Reservoir on 5th Avenue, which I believe is right over here. And that was another awesome structure that is no longer there, but is now where the New York Public Library stands, which also seems like a very old structure as well. So I'm going to show you that in a little bit, but this area was at the northern border of the built-up, quote-unquote, built-up section of the city. The building originally housed the exhibition of the industry of all nations. Great crowds turned out to view the imposing building and to see the thousands of exhibits of all kinds of manufactured goods from Europe and the Western Hemisphere. The exhibition was truly the first World's Fair to be held on the continent, and was also the last such fair held in New York until the World's Fair of 1939. So this was from the book, but I mean, this kind of just made me go down a rabbit hole, as they say, of just looking at stuff in connection with this Crystal Palace that we had in New York. I mean, arguably you could say it was nicer than the one in London, because this had a dome. I mean, that was an immense, huge, massive structure. The London's Crystal Palace, which I'll show you in a bit, but let's just take this one in here. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's probably 8 of these towers there. It's funny because if like one of these were left over, you could probably repurpose any of them into water towers, just like the Jones Beach water tower. Man, what a beautiful, look at the size of the entrances, and look at how small the people are here. They're just dumbfounded. Look at them. And like, what is going on this level here? Like, I mean, if you look at all the other levels, I mean, you could see, like, but like, what is going on here? Is this like some sort of, is this a conflagration, as they would say back then? So, in other words, a fire? Does this look like there's a fire? Is there something? I mean, what are they doing here? This very ghostly figures. Are they having like a clan meeting or a pagan ritual? It's like very ghostly over here, creepy looking. But yeah, it's almost like a premonition of a fire to come. But oh yeah, and also take a look at the different plants over here. Like these are palm trees. And if I'm not mistaken, palm trees require a lot of sunlight and generally grow in areas with hot temperatures. Yeah, warmer climates. So obviously in this building is like a giant greenhouse. It's made to, you would think, to withstand high temperatures, and also it was supposedly fireproof. And I mean, if you know, so when you put these plants there, you expect it to receive a lot of sunlight and high temperatures. I mean, we could see some stuff going on in the background here. It was like a White House, some nice built out buildings here. And I believe that's the Croton Reservoir, I believe, right here. Yeah, that's an amazing structure. I'll show you that in a bit. But beautiful, beautiful building. And like, what's going on with these people here? And like, is this, what is this, a mermaid? Who's that? All these guys with top hats, of course, and then this lady's just hanging out. But yeah, they're just having a grand old day, grand old summer day at the New York Crystal Palace. And this is the Ladding Observatory, which was near the Crystal Palace, and this was also 1853. And at the time of construction, 1853, the Ladding Observatory was one of the most remarkable structures in New York, named for Waring Ladding. Interesting name. It's his idea. The 350-foot high tower overlooked the Crystal Palace on the south side of 43rd Street near 6th Avenue, built of timber braced with iron. The observatory featured another novelty, a steam elevator, which took spectators to the various landings, which were equipped with telescopes and maps, and from which unparalleled views of the whole of New York and much surrounding country could be seen. But unfortunately, on August 30th, 1856, the observatory burnt to the ground, only 3 years after it supposedly opened. Wow, another impressive structure. And this is, just wanted to show you, this is London's Crystal Palace. So what do you think? Is this better than, I mean, it's a huge structure. I mean, this one obviously lasted many more years before. That one was burnt down in the 1930s, but this was huge. But again, it didn't have the dome like the one in New York. And this is supposedly the only photograph or daguerreotype photograph of the New York Crystal Palace. And man, look at the coloring. Even with this image, you could see the design on that dome is amazing and interesting. Thing here. The cupola, I don't know if that's even a cupola, or is that like yeah, I guess cupola, right? That's the nipple. You know. Yeah, and there's another illustration of the Crystal Palace. Really amazing how they did these detailed illustrations. And look at this one. It looks so huge. Look how tiny the people look. And what an amazing, beautiful building. Look at the etching in the glass here, the designs, and look at the giant entrances. There's your horse and buggies over there, and dirt roads, kicking up all that dirt. You know, we have dirt roads here. And there's the Croton Observatory again. I'm sorry, the Croton Reservoir. And that was the pavilion that, you know, people used to walk on, which is a reservoir from over there. so it was adjacent to the Crystal Palace. And I love looking in the background here in these shots. Look, a lot of buildings here. It was very built out, as they say. And you could see plenty of church spires in the background, several of them, in fact. So yeah, a lot going on in 1853 in New York. Interesting, and what a structure. And when was this built? Okay, so we're going to look at that in a moment, but yeah, this is the inside of the Crystal Palace. Now, why would you build this just to have an exhibition hall? It sounds to me like they just didn't know what to do with this. I'm sure that's not the purpose that it was intended for. I mean, why have all these guard towers? I mean, so let's just take a step out for a second, and I want to show you something here. It's a website. Okay, this is Crystal Palace at visualizingnyc.org. I'm going to leave the link in the description. You should check this out. I mean, some really cool stuff in here. This is by the Bard Graduate Center, and I wanted to show you regarding when this was quote-unquote built. You go over here, building the New York Crystal Palace, and yeah, this just tells you about the one in London. There's the London Crystal Palace. So based on an inspiration of the one in London, a group of NYC politicians and businessmen soon began planning their own international exhibition and invited proposals for the design of the building in the summer of 1852. And that was just when they invited proposals for it, okay? The only stipulation was that the building must be constructed entirely of cast iron and glass. The organizing committee selected the design by George Costanza, and there's their Carstensen and Gildemeister, both recent arrivals in New York. So Carstensen and supposedly built the Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen. It's a pleasure garden amusement park. And Gildemeister was also trained as an architect in Germany. Of course, they're foreign, they're from other, so we have, they're just mysterious characters from other countries came in to design these this New York Crystal Palace. And yeah, they relied on its ancient architectural template while simultaneously using new industrial area materials. So they based their design on the central symmetry of the Greek square cross plan, a form of ecclesiastical, I'm not even going to bother, ecclesiastical architecture. And there you go. So yeah, this they're facing some design problems. The massive fortress-like Croton distributing reservoir, source of the city's drinking water, loomed over the square, but they got it done. They made it work. They made it work. And lots of praise from literary legends. And American literary legend Walt Whitman wrote about the Crystal Palace that it was certainly unsurpassed anywhere for beauty, an original, aesthetic, perfectly proportioned American edifice, one of the few of modern times not beneath old times. What are they trying to say there? So lots of praise on this structure, and you can look at the whole article again. I'm not going to go through the whole thing right here, but yeah, that is so basically we saw sorry, go back there. I apologize. Let me just go through my so yeah, we have this big exhibition hall here. Yeah, and look at the date it was opened, right? So it opened on July 14th, 1853, but we just read that they met in the summer of 1852 for proposals. So this place was built in less than a year. Again, no, we don't see really any construction photos. I think you can find like stuff here. I think that has let's go through. There was one of these images here had the I think it was here. I don't remember. I'm sorry. No, it wasn't there. I apologize. But one of these yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to look for it another time. But yeah, they did have like a drawing, an illustration of like the dome still being built. One of those deals. It was an illustration. It was obviously not a full construction photo, of course. But yeah, so back to this again. This is the interior of the Crystal Palace. And again, like, you know what I think of? You know, like the Roosevelt Raceway was a raceway in Westbury, New York, in Long Island. It closed in 1988. No longer held races, but I mean, for it, the building, before they demolished the building, it remained open. They still use it for like flea markets, and I went to several baseball card shows there. So this kind of reminds me of that. Like, they didn't know what to do with this place. I mean, look, this wood stuff is stuff I could see us building. Because, I mean, look at this. I mean, was this all necessary for an exhibition hall? I mean, you're going to do all that and just sell your tchotchkes, as they say, over here. I mean, some nice tchotchkes, though. I'm sure that was... I mean, if those were antiques and artwork at that time, I mean, there must have been some amazing stuff. So, yeah, that was... But, again, like, I'm sure this was not what the building was intended for. And there, another illustration of the Crystal Palace with the Ladding Observatory. And look at the colors on this. I mean, look at beautiful design. Beautiful. Beautiful coloring. And there's your trolley with the several horses pulling it. Your muddy roads. Really muddy roads. And it looks like these some Asian gentlemen here, because they're dressed in the native garb, I guess, that when they represented their nation in the exhibition hall. So yeah, all these big lines over here. Supposedly did pretty well, brought in a lot of revenue for the city. There's another image with the Ladding Observatory and the Crystal Palace. And this, yeah, I wanted to show you this because this was the last, this was the first World's Fair in New York in 1853, and then it would not have another World's Fair until 1939. So this whole setup here, the dome and the observatory, reminds you of this. And this is called, I looked this up, it's the Trilon and the Perisphere of the 1939 New York World's Fair. And there is the construction of the Perisphere and Trilon. And yeah, that looks almost like the Ladding Observatory, right? See, in the guts of it, before they, I guess, sheetrocked it or whatever. I don't know, whatever they did. And this looks like a kickball. You know, like in the schoolyard, we ever play kickball? Does it look like, right, kickball? Maybe it is. Who knows? I don't know. But yeah, that's definitely not, though. That's a beautiful image from the 1939 World's Fair. Very cool. Very 1930s. Very, remember that iconic image from that World's Fair. There it is. So it's indicative. I guess it's a tribute to the original World's Fair. Oh, that's interesting. And there's another image of the Crystal Palace. This one is interesting too because who are these individuals here? Who are these guys? White Native Americans? Or like, really? I mean, were they just dressed up like actors? And this guy looks built, man, right? Like, really good shape. And he's holding his arm up like, what is he, like making a salute, like kind of what they did in the 1930s and 40s in Germany, which I probably can't say. But yeah, doesn't it remind you of that? And yeah, you got this guy, I guess, dressed up like a revolutionary soldier, or from whatever country he's represented. Or is that the uniforms for 1853? I don't know. I don't think so. Or was it? But yeah, and then you have, of course, selling stuff here. Baxter's Gems, more people in their native garb, and more guys in top hats, and look, going through these massive entrances into the Crystal Palace and these beautiful towers. I mean, look at the detail on this. I mean, see? And they're telling me this was built, it was just conceived in the summer of 1852 and opened in July 1853. And I guess the plants are no longer there because you don't see the plants, right? Where'd the plants go? I mean, you kind of see him here, but in the first picture they had him. But as, I guess, time went on, they took away the plants, or I don't know what. Oh, but unfortunately, there was a fire. In 1858, after the exhibition of the Industry of All Nations closed, the Crystal Palace was used for various other displays because they didn't know what else to do with it. The building was thought to be fireproof. But on October 5th, 1858, the wood and other combustible materials inside it caught fire. The high temperatures weakened the iron skeleton of the building, and it collapsed. The high temperatures made for a greenhouse building, which needs high temperatures for their plants to grow. Now this story gets better. The entire structure was completely destroyed in little more than 15 minutes. 15 minutes, a fireproof building burned to the ground. Firemen are seen here forcing their way through the crowd with their engine, but there was no chance that the primitive firefighting equipment of this period could be of any help. Wow, so they had the capability to build buildings like this, but the firefighting equipment was too primitive. That doesn't make sense. Incredibly, it gets even better. Incredibly, although 2,000 people were inside when the fire started, no one was killed, and they all got out in 15 minutes. No one was harmed. Hey, God bless them. Hallelujah. That's great that they made it, but something not right about that story. And then, of course, like we do, is all, as our humanity does, pieces of the Crystal Palace were soon being offered for sale as souvenirs of both the unique building and the catastrophic fire. Because that's what we do. We just, profit off of the morbid, relics of the building. We care, you want to buy the parts. Forget about the building itself. We just want to own a relic from the building. But yeah, look at all these people standing around here. There's another fire photo. This one looks angrier, this depiction. And all these guys in top hats. So what's going on here? How did this happen? Seems like they're all like waiting here, like expecting an event, like an exhibition of some sort. Oh, but they got 2,000 people out there. Pretty amazing. And then in 15 minutes. Wow. They knew how to run out in single file. They had fire exits, I guess, and all that. I mean, all these people stand there, like, every one person couldn't just grab, like, a container of water and just, like, contribute. I mean, instead of just watching it burn down, they're just like, duh. As these guys, their primitive firefighting techniques try to put it out. But yeah, that's crazy. Look at how the flames are coming out of this dome here, out of each porthole. Wild. And there's the London Crystal Palace when burnt down in the 1930s. But yeah, that's what happens. There's another story too. This was also from the book. So by the way, you'll see. Not all the images I just shared were from that book. You see, like I started with this book, and then I found out about this, and a few other images, and it just, like leads you to a rabbit hole of other stuff. But yeah, this was from the book. Obviously, you could see with the depiction there. But there's another story from the book. This is the Atlantic Cable, the intercontinental Atlantic telegraph cable that they laid on the Atlantic Ocean floor from North America to England. And this was the City Hall fire of 1858. And what happened here? In the summer of 1858, on the third attempt, a telegraphic cable was successfully laid across the Atlantic Ocean, shortening the time needed to communicate with England and the continent from several weeks to minutes. At the time, it was considered one of the greatest achievements in the history of mankind, and in the waves of enthusiasm that New York shared greatly in the Atlantic Cable Mania, something happened here. On the night of August 17th, the day after Queen Victoria and President Buchanan had exchanged messages of congratulations on the success of the new cable, a large quantity of fireworks was set off from the roof of New York City Hall. That's responsible. And they got a little crazy and the building caught fire. The cupola and part of the roof were destroyed and had to be rebuilt. Interesting. But no lives were lost. Oh, well, that's wonderful. This creepy fire here. I mean, doesn't it look like a skeleton holding a bouquet of roses here, kind of, right? Yeah, another fire, 1858. And then only 2 weeks after that, they had a parade. This was held along Broadway, in which sailors from the Niagara ship and other ships involved in the laying of the cable marched to the cheers of citizens, who also cheered a coil of leftover cable which 6 horses pulled on a float. In this view, we see some of Niagara's men carrying a model of their ship past Matthew Brady's daguerreotyping salon. That was the type of photography that was popular at the time. The day's festivities culminated in a celebration at the Crystal Palace in honor of the originator of the project. So this was in, this was shortly before the Crystal Palace burnt down. They had a celebration for this. But yeah, this miracle of the transatlantic cable was short-lived, because on September 4th, the cable failed, unable to transmit further messages because of faulty insulation. And then, yeah, the Civil War intervened, and it was 8 years and one more unsuccessful attempt before all of the problems were solved, and a cable finally went into continuous operation between Europe and North America. So, yeah, unfortunately, that was another sad thing. Now, this is an interesting newspaper article from 1858, which reported the fire. And first off, let me just say, this was your average newspaper around that time. And this is the only way they communicated information, really. And this is right before the telegraph. And the telegraph would shorten the information, but this was like the primary source of education. People were well read back then because they had to. And could you imagine how long this was? Just one page of a newspaper in 1850 article here, and I'm not going to read the whole article. I'm just going to take some highlights from it. It's the destruction of the Crystal Palace. So yeah, but the thing about this article was an interesting thing, because it was saying how the building, the Crystal Palace Association, went bankrupt and it was in debt. And one of the creditors was P.T. Barnum, and he hadn't received any of his money back, but he also went into bankruptcy, just like the Crystal Palace Association. So he was a creditor. And yeah, the Crystal Palace was the most creditable structure ever erected in New York. Its proportions were admirable, and it was an ornament to New York and contributed largely to its business, its importance, and its attractions. Why it should have been so opposed, hated, maligned, still more, why some of the property holders in the neighborhood of which it constituted the principal grace should have warred upon and sought its destruction, we could never imagine. So people were out to see this place destroyed. So shocker that it burnt down. It went into bankruptcy in the fall of or winter of 1854. This guy's been, John White's, trying to dispose of the property, and yeah. So there became some suspicion that the city's tenant has now burnt up the building. Is there no redress for its creators and its creditors? This is probably the work for lawyers involved in this query. And another thing of note, the fact that the fair of the American Institute was being held in the Crystal Palace at the time of its destruction by fire augments the loss still greater, from the reason that an extensive collection of works of art, machinery, and the city were on exhibition and all destroyed. So yeah, we lost a lot of stuff there, works of art, in that fire as well. And this is the Croton Reservoir. And I want to just take a step back here and show you this amazing structure here. This is, first off, this is the Croton Observatory. This was adjacent to the Crystal Palace. And this was built supposedly in May of 1837, and the water began filling on July 4th, 1842. So took 5 years. Also known as the Murray Hill Reservoir, was an above-ground reservoir at 42nd Street and 5th Avenue in the New York City borough of Manhattan, covering 4 acres and holding 20 million U.S. gallons. It supplied the city with drinking water during the 19th century. Its massive 50-foot high granite walls, which presented a vaguely Egyptian-style facade, were 25 feet thick. Atop the walls was a public promenade walkway offering panoramic views, and Edgar Allan Poe enjoyed walking there nevermore. So yeah, we had Let's go to that. Let's take a look. That's the Croton Observatory. Sorry here. So this was the 50-foot walls. This is the outside of the Croton Reservoir. Massive structure. It doesn't look like the base of like a pyramid. Very Egyptian here. And of course, this is supposedly, I think this is like 1898, right before they demolished it. And this area became the New York Public Library, interestingly enough. This was the site of the New York Public Library. Now, what happened is the New York Library looks old in itself, but this was massive. This was a reservoir, and this is from 1848, it looks like. Yeah. And look at this, how people used to walk on here. Beautiful, Edgar Allan Poe. Look at this. This looks so Egyptian. Look at the little entrance here. Like, oh, man. Beautiful. And there's your amazing, amazing. And there it is again, just a stunning work of architecture. People are just like, look at the roads, the dirt roads. People are like, we built that. And this is, of course, after the it was demolished in 1898, the Croton Reservoir. Around that time, they then built the New York Public Library building right by Bryant Park, where the Crystal Palace used to be. And this is the construction photo of the New York Public Library. And was the Croton Reservoir, I don't even see destruction photos of it. Like, how did they knock this down and it became the library? What did they do with the water? I mean, this requires, I gotta get into this. Didn't really plan to get into this too much, but definitely gonna go by Bryant Park someday and check this area out. And this is from 1906, obviously after the Croton Reservoir, and they look like they're building the New York Public Library here. Wow, all that. I mean, or was that part of the Croton Reservoir? Now, this looks very old and amazing in itself. This is the New York Public Library. And we're definitely going to go down there. It reminds me from Ghostbusters, remember? Dun, 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 right? They ran out. But amazing building. And this is supposedly the site of the Croton Reservoir that we just looked at, and this is on the inside. This could be looks like would be the wall of the reservoir, about the same height, right? And there's that entrance. Did they convert the reservoir into this, or was this always here, or was that in a different location? It kind of looks like an odd photo, right? This is like New York Public Library when it first opened in 1911. Like a very pristine looking. This is supposedly part of the original Croton Reservoir in the library. I got to take a look at this. I obviously not take this photo, but I got to see what happened. How they turned the Croton Reservoir, and which was also adjacent to Crystal Palace, which burnt down. Ladding Observatory burnt down. And they just turned this into the New York Public Library. I'm just so confused. And there's another shot of the Croton Reservoir as well. So, amazing stuff here. I'm going to go back to my last episode about the Brooklyn Inebriates Home. Wanted to add something about that. Again, this was the home where alcoholics would go to rehabilitate sometime after 1867, and then it closed in 1898. But yeah, I wanted to just show you a few things. I found another image of a publication for the Inebriates Home, and this is kind of a cool thing. I mean, it has a more detailed cupola here. You can see, like, that's definitely not the one that is there today. That is a totally different cupola, but a lot of this original structure does look like it's still there in the system, the monastery building. But look what they're doing on the front lawn here, playing baseball. And that's definitely before 1898, so that's like, Cap Anson time. I don't know if you know baseball players from around the 1890s, but yeah, there's like Cap Anson, Mike King Kelly, were these big stars around that time. But yeah, I thought that's interesting, and they let the inmates play baseball. I mean, it's been a great time, beautiful views. They were really taken care of, because This is a medical journal article regarding the inebriate's home from 1884, basically saying how it worked. It said, many intemperate men who have entered them voluntarily and conformed to their teachings have gone forth to the world stronger and better than before, and are still pursuing sober and useful lives. 1 man out of 3 has been saved, and this against strong adverse circumstances in most cases. Wow, so they're saying this actually worked, and then they just stopped funding it because they said, oh, well, they chose to drink, why are we paying for it? Even though this was a very effective way of treating people. They had this inebriates home, so it did seem to work. And like anything, from after the 19th century, any things that work, just like free energy, they get rid of it, and that's that. Speaking of the inebriates home, this kind of looks like a greenhouse section of the kind of like the Crystal Palace, right? And I wanted to also show this in an inebriates home. This is supposedly looking at Manhattan. Like, what is that there? This is definitely in the late 1800s. So, got some tall structure there, and there's bridge. So I just wanted to point that out as well. But yeah, that's it. Anyway, that's all for now. Each and every one of you for watching this. If you made it this far, or if you didn't, either way, I love you all. I want to wish all my fellow Christians a very happy Easter, and I love you all. And until the next one, God bless you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.